Welcome to this new episode where we are starting on our camera series for our World of Warcraft clone. And in this one, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a camera rig where we can adjust things like the height, the speed, and the distance that we can set it to, like the max distance. And all with only 3 game objects: the camera rig, the tilt, and the main camera. And let me just show you how it works right now. So if you're worried, this still needs a bit of polish, but essentially it does the basic stuff that we have already had working for quite a while. So it just follows the player around, matches the rotation. But what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be adding our functionality of clicking and dragging to move the camera around, and then also using the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. One of the things that I think probably needs to be said is that a couple of the controls are not going to be working the way we expect, and also there are just going to be things that we're not going to be able to do because of the way Unity is limited. And that sucks, but it's also not a huge deal, so I think we'll just move forward and take liberties where we can, simply just because we have no other choice. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So I'm going to start just by grabbing the player in the hierarchy and opening him up to show all of his contents. I'm going to take the camera and reset the transforms. And actually I'm also just going to reset the transforms of the player so we can get him into a reasonable position. Then I'm going to take the main camera, pull it out, and from there I'm going to create a new folder and call it prefabs. I should have been doing this earlier, but basically I'm going to take the player, drop it in there, and just save it so that we have the player, and that if we delete it accidentally, we don't have to stress about it. Alright, so now I'm going to create an empty, and I'm going to call this one camera rig. I'm going to reset the transforms. Then inside camera rig, I'm going to create an empty and call this one tilt. Then I'm going to drop main camera into tilt. So basically, camera rig is going to be able to rotate on the y-axis, and tilt is going to be able to rotate on the x-axis. So essentially it's just going to give us independent rotations for those two so that we can have like a clean rotation. Alright, now that that's done, let's add a component. Let's call it camera controller. Not to be confused with camera controls, which is a Procore thing. Just ignore that. Just create camera controller. Alright, so here we are in our camera controller. And I'm just going to very quickly get rid of all the greens here. And we'll just start setting up all the variables we need. So the first ones we need are input variables. And these are going to be pretty simple. Basically, the only actual controls that you can't change in World of Warcraft, as far as I know, are the mouse buttons. So that includes the left mouse click, the right mouse click, and the middle mouse click. We basically need to put those up here so that we can have them available for us. So let's create a key code. We'll call the first one left mouse. We'll set it equal to keycode.mouse0. Then we'll go right mouse. Set that equal to keycode mouse 1. And then we'll create middle mouse. And we'll set that one equal to keycode mouse 2. Next, we actually have to create the camera variables. So we'll just call it camera variables. These are mostly going to be floats. So the first two we're going to want to be able to change. So public float, and this one's going to be camera height. And the second one is going to be called camera max distance. Distance being like how far you can zoom out. This one is just going to be a float. We're not going to be able to change this at all. And we're going to call this one camera max tilt, and I'm going to set it to 90 by default. Then we're going to create another public float, and we're going to call this one camera speed, set it equal to 2, and directly above it, inside square brackets, we're going to type in range, and inside brackets we're going to go 0 to 4. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to create a little slider that we can use to change the camera speed. Alright, and then the last ones are going to be private variables that are basically just current pan, which is going to be like our rotation on the y-axis, current tilt, which is going to be our rotation on the x-axis, and we're going to set that equal to 10, and then current distance, and it's just going to be how far we're zoomed out, and I'm going to set that equal to 5. Alright, next we're going to need a couple of references. So the first one's going to be a player controls called player. Then we're going to need a public transform of the tilt. And lastly, we're going to need a camera for the camera. And we'll just call that main cam. Now that we got all this set up, let's actually set up the references. So player is going to be equal to find objects of type player controls. So it's basically just going to find the player object that we have and apply that to it. And then main cam is going to be equal to camera.main. And that's that. So very quickly, let's grab the tilt. So tilt, we'll just drop that right in there so it has something to use. Alright, so now that we have this done in the start, we need to set up all the transforms so that the camera controller knows where to go. So first we'll go transform.position is going to be equal to player.transform.position plus vector3.up times camera height, which I just realized we forgot to set. So let's do that. So let's set up camera height, and we'll set it to 1.75f. We can change this later if we need to, and we'll make camera distance equal to 25. And it's probably not going to update. No, we can't. I'll just type it in. Perfect. But if you want to know how to reset all the values here, you can right-click the camera controller and click reset, and it'll just reset all these values for you. But you will have to reapply the tilt. Alright, so next we will set the transform.rotation equal to player.transform.rotation. Next we'll set up the tilt. So the tilt.Euler angles is going to be equal to new vector 3. Tilt is on the x-axis, so current tilt, and then transform.Euler angles.y, transform.Euler angles.z. And then finally, we need to set up the camera distance. So we're going to do this by going main cam dot transform dot position plus equals tilt dot forward times negative camera current distance. Alright, so now if we just test out our camera, it sets it up right in the position that we want it to, but it doesn't follow our player, which is not a great thing. Alright, so let's actually set that up. So down here, we're going to create a new void, and we're going to call this one camera transforms First, I'm just going to take the transform position and copy paste it because it's pretty much exactly what we need. But for rotation, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to go transform.EulerAngles. We're going to set it equal to new vector 3, and that will be transform.EulerAngles.x current pan, and then transform.EulerAngles.y. Next, I'm going to copy paste the tilt.EulerAngles, and instead of this, of the transform, I'm going to copy tilt. And then finally, for the main camera position, I'm going to copy this. However, I'm going to make a couple changes. So for the plus equals here, I'm just going to change that to equals. And right before tilt forward, I'm actually going to go transform.position plus tilt forward. So it's basically doing this in reference to the position. Now let's take the camera transforms and put it into a late update. And I just like getting rid of the private for no particular reason at all. Let's see how that's doing. Alright, so it's moving backwards and forwards, side to side, but it's not rotating with our guy. Alright, so to fix this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do current pan is equal to player.transform.EulerAngles.y. This should fix our problem. What is going on? That's not right at all. Oh, okay. So the error here is that in transform.EulerAngles, it needs to be z. Right at the end here, it needs to be z. So that was the issue. So I was rotating it on the z-axis as well. And there it is, it works. But the thing is, that works pretty much exactly as we had it working before, except just through code. So we need to figure out how to get it to work the way we need it to. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to do this with our key codes here. However, first we need to talk about the different camera states in order to understand how we're going to actually manipulate the camera. Alright, so let's have a look at the camera inputs. So in addition to this being like just a really good way of controlling the game, we just need to understand exactly what's going on. So first I'll just like to sort of break it down by saying that there are basically like 4 different camera states in this game. The first one is basically like pretty simple. The camera just follows and rotates with your player. That's it. You're not providing any inputs to manipulate the camera at all. So we'll just call this one camera none because nothing's happening to the camera other than it's following the player. The second one is when you're clicking on the left mouse button and you're rotating the camera around the player. So the player basically rotates independently of the camera and also moves forward independently of the camera. But you can rotate the camera using the mouse. We'll call that one camera rotate. The third one is going to be when you can steer the player using the camera by holding down the right mouse button. And we'll just, you can steer, and then A and D go from being able to rotate the player to being able to strafe. So it actually makes things pretty easy to control. And so we'll just call that one camera steer. The last one's actually pretty interesting because there are 2 different ways of doing it. Basically what it is you can steer the camera holding down the left mouse button, but if you hold down the right mouse button at the same time, your character actually starts moving forward. So this is kind of like a steer auto run type deal. And again, A and D are strafe now. And you can also do the exact same thing by holding down the middle mouse button. So it's kind of interesting that you have 2 different options for setting this one up. So I'm going to call this one camera run. So yeah, that's it. The way we're going to tackle this is we're going to create a new public enum. And we're going to call this one camera states. And inside camera states, we're going to create 4 camera states. First one is camera none, when nothing's happening to the camera. Second one's going to be camera rotate, when we're rotating the camera. Third one is going to be camera steer, when we're using the camera to steer the character. And then the last one is going to be called camera run, when we're using the camera to both steer and move the character forward. Before references, I'm just going to create the camera state. And it's going to be public camera state. Let's just change this to state. Public camera state, we'll call this one camera state just for easiness, which I don't think is a word, easiness. Camera state dot camera none by default. Next, inside update, we're going to do if not input dot get mouse dot get key left mouse. Then what we want to do is we want to set the camera state equal to camera state dot camera none. And then in here, I'm actually going to do an else if rather than just an else, because there's more that I have to add here. But if input dot get key left mouse, then camera state is going to be equal to camera state dot rotate. And actually, just for the sake of understanding, the reason why I'm leaving else this else if statement there is because, like with this if statement up here, I want to add the other 2 inputs to it. So right mouse and middle mouse. So basically what this is doing is when it's saying when nothing is happening, camera none. But when we have the left mouse pressed, then camera rotate. I'll be adding the other ones later, so don't worry if this doesn't make sense right now. You will understand, I promise. Alright, so next we're going to take this current pan and I'm going to put this one into a switch statement. So switch camera state, and this one will be case camera state dot camera none break, and then inside here I'm just going to put this. So basically when it's a camera none, then the current pan is just equal to the player's rotation. Now that that's set, basically we can see what we're doing, right? So everything's working and then we click, then it stops working, and then when we let go it just snaps back, which we'll fix. We'll make it smooth, so don't worry about that. Essentially what we want to do is we want to create a set of inputs that we can use to manipulate our camera. So for this one will be void camera inputs, and in here we're going to create an if statement that says if camera state is not equal to camera state dot camera none, then we're going to do all this stuff in here. In this case, I want to check to see if it's camera rotate, because if it's camera rotate, then we are going to be manipulating the pan. So if camera state is equal to camera state dot camera rotate, then our current pan will be equal to input dot get axis mouse x. So if you're wondering why this is a really pretty much the only way we can actually get the mouse input, and it's actually kind of sad because if you look here in our project settings, it's basically just these 3: mouse X, mouse Y, and mouse scroll wheel. So the 3 different axes of the mouse. However, in World of Warcraft, you can actually take the mouse scroll wheel and change inputs based on it. And right now, it doesn't seem like there's a way to keybind the mouse scroll wheel in Unity. So that's a limitation that we're not going to be able to be putting it into the final project. But Alright, so we've got the camera pan moving the mouse X, and in this case I'm going to be putting the camera tilt outside. Sorry, the current tilt outside. And that'll be equal to input dot get axis mouse Y. And actually I made a mistake here. I actually made two mistakes here. So current pan needs to be plus equal to mouse X, and same with current tilt. And then at the same time, we need to be multiplying this by camera speed. Alright. And actually, just to be safe, let's reset current tilt. So it's always going to be equal to 10 when we reset it. So let's just reset that. And then we're going to take camera inputs, and we're going to put them right at the bottom of update. Alright, so let's see how this is working. Alright, so we're running around, camera's following around, then we click the mouse button down, and we can rotate. Except it looks like on the y-axis it's not quite doing what I need it to. So I think I need to invert that. We'll just change that to minus equals in order to invert it. And that should fix it. Yeah. So alright, so here we've run into another issue. Basically, the camera tilt. The camera tilt is currently infinite, but we want to make sure that it absolutely isn't. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to clamp it. So current tilt will be equal to mathf.clamp. We'll clamp current tilt, and then the float minimum is going to be negative camera max tilt, and then camera max tilt. So basically it's just limiting it from negative 90 to 90 degrees. And that should work for us. So let's see. We can go all the way up to 90, all the way down to, all the way down to 90. I think it'd probably be a good idea to add in the zooming in and the zooming out. So let's get on that. Right at the bottom of camera inputs, outside of everything, because I kind of want to be able to do this whenever, I'm going to set current distance plus equal to input.getAxis, and it's going to be mouse scroll wheel, I believe. So yes, it's mouse scroll wheel, but there's a space between mouse and scroll wheel. There's going to be no multiplication at first, we just need to see the speed, but underneath it we're going to clamp it as well, so that's going to be current distance is equal to mathf.clamp. Current not camera inputs. Current distance is going to be our first float. The second one is going to be 0 as our minimum, and the last one is going to be camera max distance. And let's just see how that works. And then zooming in. Oh, okay, so it's inverted, and it's also very slow. So I think I'm going to multiply it by 2. And then I'm also going to do minus equals instead of plus equals. Alright, so that actually feels pretty good. And it can zoom out pretty far. That's pretty good. Alright, so that was part 1 of creating the camera rig. I think also the 6th episode of this whole series. We're probably going to be finishing creating like the camera controls next episode, but we're probably not going to start dealing with the collisions until after that and smoothing out the camera and that kind of thing. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I don't know. After that, I'm thinking we'll either deal with flying or swimming. And since there is a little bit of overlap and they both kind of rely on the camera a little bit, we'll just kind of have to see what happens. Again, as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Super trooper, super trooper, super trooper, and he sells soup.